Mothers to me, I mean, my mother is on a pedestal. You know, everybody's mother is on a pedestal to me, and it is sort of something incredibly worthwhile to be a good mother. Now, what a good mother is I don't know, but I know that there are good mothers, and I know it's very important to be a good mother. I'm Chris Sykes, and I gave my child up for adoption 15 years ago when he was 3 years old. I just was not coping, you know, very well. I mean, I was in a sort of treadmill with work. I had to have two jobs. I had a full-time job and a part-time job. The part-time job was used to pay for the childcare that I needed to go to the full-time job. And it just didn't fit in with my notion about what a mother was. I know now that what I knew I was a bit off the beam, but I perceived that I wasn't being a good mother. And that may be one of the reasons where I felt somebody else could do a better job. You know, somebody else could bring this child up a lot better than I can. And I was told that. Yeah, I remember he was on a rocking horse, and I had his suitcase full of clothes. And this nurse came in and just dragged me out of this room and threw me out the door. And I was just left standing in the street, you know, thinking, God, I've got to get away. I've just got to get away. So I went to Sydney. And all of my energies at that time were just concentrated on blocking the whole thing out. I thought, the quicker I can forget all this, the quicker I can get on with life. You know, I can just block it out. I just don't want to know, you know. And I did that quite successfully for a couple of weeks. But slowly it started infiltrating my little barrier, you know. I can think. I used to wake up in the morning thinking, oh, I wonder what Adam's in. Then, you know, still, I mean, that habitual thing about getting up and going to the child's room, you know, going to see what he's up to, stuff like that. I mean, I kept finding myself making the motions to do it. Oh my God, no, yeah. And it got so bad, you know, after sort of, you know, another 3.5 weeks, and I thought, no, it came to 29th. I knew I'd been given this 30 days to make my mind up, you know. 29th day, I got in that car and I just hightailed it back to Brisbane. And I hit the Gold Coast and it started teeming down with rain, you know, and I was bawling my eyes out, tired, you know, just driving straight through. And I got to this childcare centre thing, and it was about 10, 11 o'clock at night, you know, and still streaming down the rain. I was bashing on this door, you know. Come on. And it seemed to take forever for somebody to answer, and I just heard these footsteps approaching, and I was bashing on. And she opened the door, about that much, she opened this door and put her face out, and I just said, I've come for my child. And she said something, she said, oh, who are you? And I told her, she said, you're too late. I said, I can't be. She said, yesterday, you're too late, you know. And I said, I'm not. And she was adamant. She said, yes, midday. You should have been before midday. No, you're too late. You're all the same, you women. You know, you just come back here, think you can take the kids away when you want them, you know. Oh, and she was terrible. She was really angry. And then she just slammed the door in my face. And I just sat there and bawled my eyes out. Awful. And I just didn't know what to do. You know, I was just really, really off the planet.
My mother made the arrangements to go to the home. I was put in a taxi. We went out there. We went to Broadmeadows. I sat in the room. I don't know what arrangements were made. I wasn't involved in it. And then I was taken back to the Providence Society, or they had to call it the Naughty Girls' Home, we called it. I'm Dalma Gay, and I placed a baby for adoption 34 years ago. I didn't know how long I was going to have my baby with me, but I think I was in the hospital for about 10 days, week to 10 days. Then I was taken back to the home, and my baby was kept in a bassinet in the kitchen, and I had to look after her. When they weren't watching me, I tried to feed her, you know, myself. So we had I did manage a few private moments on my own, and I've never regretted that. Although it was forbidden, we weren't supposed to do those things. I have heard different with other mothers. They had to feed theirs because they had to have them nice and plump. But I did it because I wanted to do it. I wanted to have that closeness. I wanted to give her something. I wanted to have something to remember. And then I was just told out of the blue one day that a taxi was coming for me, and I had to get my baby ready and take her in the taxi out to Broadmeadows Baby Home. I really didn't know. I didn't know. I must have been very naive. I really didn't know what was happening. I didn't ask questions. I wasn't told anything. Wasn't encouraged to. I just sent out to Broadmeadows, and taxi was told to wait, and I went into a room where there were two nuns, and one asked me to sit down, and the other one said she'd hold my baby for me so I'd be more comfortable. And they put this paper in front of me and a pen, and just said to sign there. I signed there. I don't remember reading anything. I don't remember being told anything. There was nothing. I was just told to sign there. And then I looked round to take my baby back, and she was gone. And so had the other nun gone. I said, "Where are they gone?" And I said, "It's all right, she's gone." And it really meant she was gone.
When we were planning this vigil, we had presumed that for the media to become interested, they would need something that held their interest. From our point of view, the most challenging aspect of it was that we were asking natural mothers to come out into the streets and to be public about their experience. And really today is history. Today is the making of history, because what we had was a large group of women who were prepared to come out, to present themselves to the world, to have some pride about themselves, and to say, I have had a child, and I do have a right to at least let them know I love them.
I'm Loriniggardly.
Over the last 8 years, I've been centrally involved in the adoption self-help community. I became the founding member of an organisation called the Association of Relinquishing Mothers. And that's an organisation set up to support women who have given a child up for adoption. And in my role as convener of that organisation over the last 6 years, I have met hundreds of women and talked with them about their experience of having placed a child. My commitment to those issues and my interest, and I'd have to say it isn't just an interest, it is a central part of my life, and it comes from the fact that when I was 17, I placed my first child, a son, for adoption. And it is out of that experience that I understand what my role is in our community, and I seek to help other women understand their experience differently, very differently to the way society presents that experience. At 17, I personally experienced total powerlessness in seeing the system move into play and me unable to affect it, unable to stop it, taking over my child, imposing on me a decision that I was incredibly uncomfortable with. I know that that is the experience of hundreds of women, that the society geared up and they were swept along. And that powerlessness is incredibly frightening.
To be unmarried and pregnant was a terrible crime. You weren't expected to keep your child, you weren't allowed to, it was so frowned on. People started to think that the pregnancy was the problem, but it was really what happened to make you pregnant. In the first instance, that's what was really the embarrassment, was that you had been involved in a mature sexual act. And that's what you were really condemned for, doing something that was probably natural, although in my case it was aggression and rape. Society would have judged my family as well as me, and I got the message very strong that I had been a very bad person, that I had now to take my punishment, and that punishment was to give my baby to somebody else who would appreciate it more than me. We locked it all away. It wasn't talked about. You know, I would have afternoon teas with army wives when I was in the army camp, and they'd be talking about their babies and their pregnancies, and I wasn't allowed to talk about mine. I didn't dare say I'd been pregnant. I couldn't say what it was like to have heartburn, or what it was like to have a movement, or what it was like when I went into labour. I couldn't talk about those things because, as far as they were concerned, I hadn't had a baby. I'd never been pregnant. So I had to always pretend I knew nothing about it.
There are politics involved in motherhood issues, which cause some real tensions for women who have placed children. And there are politics that involve women who are infertile, who have previously been that group who have received our children. And I think in an overall way it reflects the kind of society that we live in, where notions about who owns the child and where that child belongs has very much to do with the status of the people who gave birth to them. When we look at adoption legislation and the practice that has gone with that, it's very difficult to believe that they in fact weren't being society's police. Because to ask a woman to have a child and give her child to someone else and never to ask anything about that child again is very cruel. And the life of a child who was illegitimate was a very poor life, certainly in the 20s, 30s and 40s. And what grew out of that for the 50s, 60s era was not so much that they were as badly treated in their day-to-day lives, but they carried with them a stain, a mark. And so there was enormous pressure on a natural mother to not bequeath on her child that mark. And it was one of the other very powerful reasons for maintaining secrecy. The secret protected the child from its status of illegitimacy. The secrecy protected the natural mother from her loss of virginity. And the secrecy also protected the infertile couple from the presentation of their infertility to the community. And I believe that is why it is such a powerful component of adoption. It apparently served the needs of all the parties. It's interesting to note that in the 1980s, when there has been such an enormous downturn in the numbers of children being made available for adoption, that surrogacy has become very much a more acceptable event in our community. That women have a sense that they would like to nurture and give to other people. That desire to be generous is used in surrogacy. And I believe our community hasn't begun to think about the implications of surrogacy in our community. The implication that in the context of our material world, we are now willing to see children as yet one more commodity to be dealt in.
I always think of myself as a mother, even though Christopher's not with me. My name's Josie and 3 years ago I gave up my baby for adoption. The first day I found out I was pregnant, I couldn't believe it. I just kept saying, no, there's no such thing, I can't be pregnant, and all the rest of it, which I had all the signs of being pregnant, but I just totally ignored it. And the next day I decided my only option is adoption, because, you know, if I'm going to do something with my life, I'll have to adopt. I can't look after a child. I didn't have the skills, I didn't have the support, I didn't have the resources to look after the child at that stage. Seeing my father struggle with 3 children for 10 years, 12 years by himself, yes, that motivated me greatly, as my father was a single parent. Somebody said to me once that we all have to give up our babies. I was just giving up my baby before everybody else. So the initial grieving was just the pits. I couldn't believe I'd never ever felt such pain in my life, and it was like a hole in the middle of you. I just kind of felt, and over the years, I suppose I could just describe it as the holes got smaller. The initial grieving's finished, but no, I still feel like there's grieving. His birthdays are the worst. Every time his birthdays come around, I just can't operate that day at all. I really have to have the day off for work. Since he's been born, I've been taking that day off for work and just kind of just doing really nice things for myself, because it's really hard to operate. One day I do hope to meet Christopher, very much so. I don't expect to take on parenting him, but I do expect to meet him at some stage, just to find out how his life is, what happened in his life, for him to find out me, to find out his history and where he came from, and you know, what his family, his biological family is about. And I think it is extremely important for children, people, to know their history.
There's still a lot of constraint about it at home, like when I visit home, when I go back to Brisbane. It's one of those questions that's never spoken about. It's one, you know, my younger sister, who, as I said, is 17, just a few months younger than Adam, made a big faux pas around the kitchen table when she was a lot younger. Like, she remembers him, you know, and she just said in the middle of dinner once, "Oh, whatever happened to that Adam?" You know, and there's just stone silence. My father dropped his cutlery on the plate. My 2 sisters sort of nearly ducked under the table, and everybody was waiting for this big explosion to happen. And after about 10 seconds, everybody started eating again as though nothing had happened. You know, it's just gone complete. All his photographs have gone out of the photograph albums, you know, there's just nothing around to ever remind anybody that he even existed.
I never really thought of myself as a mother because I didn't consider that I'd done the mothering. But I happened to see this group was having a meeting, and I went along to see what sort of women relinquishing mothers were. I really didn't know what that word meant. I didn't feel like I'd relinquished her. I felt like I had just given it to somebody that could do better than me, and that would bring her up better than I could. And I went and I saw these lovely women. And they were all calling themselves mum. We were told we had a right to call ourselves mother. Your body never lets you forget, but you do begin to think, because it's been hidden away for so long, it might have been a nightmare, or you hoped it was a nightmare. But she was part of me, and I had carried her for 9 months, and I'd nursed her. She was part of my body. And I'd given her the gift of life. Pain will never go away, and it won't ever give me back my baby. My arms will always be empty. We thought we were doing what was best for our child, what society said we should do. Such unselfish women. Because for me, I don't think now that I did the right thing, but I need to be assured that I did the right thing for her. And she might think I didn't want her, and I did want her to know. I wanted her to know more than anything that I did love her, and that's why I couldn't keep her, because I didn't think I'd make a good mum. And I didn't think I could do it on my own. I knew that I was signing away my rights to parent her, But I don't think I ever believed I was signing away the rights not to know about her, not to hear that she was okay. I didn't think that I would ever not see her sometime in my life and know what's happened to her. And as long as I didn't see the child, as long as I didn't have the child, out of sight, out of mind, and it would be gone, like a lot of people thought. In fact, I was told that when I left the home, when I was put back in the taxi, I was patted on the back and told that all the girls felt like that, but I would soon feel normal. I was never to know what normal meant again after that.
Natural mothers now are able to speak of the immense grief that they have felt in walking away from their child. But much more than that, there is a very strong overlay of guilt, because as a woman and as a mother, we appear to have betrayed our own offspring by seeming disinterested, by appearing that we can simply walk away from them and hand them over to other people. And that's been a very painful experience for women to address.
I'm Veronica Shanks, and I gave up my first child for adoption in 1963. And last year I met him after counselling through the adoption agency. It came as a big surprise about 5 years ago when I did talk to a social worker and found that I could possibly find some information about him anyway, and that perhaps there was a possibility that I could let him know how I felt, because that was one of the, I think the most difficult thing in all the years was the thought that perhaps my son would think that he was unwanted when really I loved him more than anything. I wanted to keep my baby, really, really wanted to, but I didn't see that I could, and I thought that it would be really best for him if he had what I believed then was a proper chance with two proper parents instead of one, just a single mum struggling, and it would have been a struggle. I guess it wasn't very rational at all, thinking that my desperate need was then to have another baby. I thought to replace Nicholas, but I found that each child just has their own special place and their own joy. And though, my other kids are absolutely wonderful, they never ever touched that empty hole. They all had their own new place in my life, and that it didn't ever stop hurting. I loved being pregnant. I loved just the thought of a child growing inside me, and I just adored being pregnant, but emotionally I didn't cope. And with each pregnancy I attempted suicide. A couple of times later I had counselling with that. But then I wasn't ever able to, I guess, go to a certain stage with once with a psychiatrist, once with a psychologist, and I get to a certain stage, but I never got to the stage of saying that I had a baby adopted. And I just couldn't. It was just hurt too much to acknowledge it, really. It wasn't that I was ashamed of it or didn't want anybody to know. It was just that pain was more than I could have handled, and talking about it would have made it more real. I just sort of be like a little kid. I'd just hang onto my knees into my chest and just howl and just make little animal noises because I couldn't. It was just so incredibly painful. Until I actually met Nicholas, there was always that inner feeling of not being okay. I can remember, it seemed like the first time in my life there was a bit of sunshine come under, and I hadn't been aware of how much I'd been living under a grey blanket all those years, but it was the first time I'd ever really seen the sunshine. I think because his adoptive father was a landscape gardener, and it just suddenly seemed that was right. That was the nicest thing anybody could possibly be who wanted to bring up my child, because gardening's always been a big thing in my family, and also quite a few of my family members are artistic. So it sort of seemed a combination of getting your hands dirty and artistic, and I thought, right, there's potential. It might have worked out right. We're so much alike that find there's very little left for environment. I think most of what governs us is inherited. After meeting Nicholas, I was just tap dancing along the Milky Way for months and months and months and doing cartwheels over mountains. I couldn't believe such happiness. I called him Mark. His adoptive parents called him Nicholas. I guess now I think of him as Nicholas all the time. At first it was, knowing his name was difficult because Mark was all the pain and Nicholas all the joy. And in a way, sometimes I think Mark only as the baby as I knew him then, and Nicholas as the person as he really is. I can't ever come to terms with it being a good thing for a child not to know his origins, or for somebody having to give up a baby and never knowing what's happened to it.
When somebody dies, it's virtually the end. Like, you go to the funeral, you say goodbye, and that's it, and you know somebody's dead. But with adoption, it's an ongoing thing. It's like a seeping wound. I always describe it as a seeping wound that won't heal. As much as you try healing it, it won't heal. That's a real kind of gnaw that gnaws at you, you know, what's happening. So at least in death, they've gone, goodbye. But in adoption, it's where are you? You know, what's happening? No child I could take the place of Christopher. I think Christopher's the only person that can take the place of Christopher.
One of the very powerful messages to women when they place a child is that the natural mother doesn't have anything to offer that child. What some natural mothers come to understand, and certainly what I came to understand, is that of all the things that we didn't have, what we do have is a capacity to love. That the children are best loved when they are loved by many, not best loved when they are loved exclusively. And I think that's the hallmark of adoption, that it's about ownership. It's about what is good enough for one woman is not good enough for another woman. It's about birth being right in some circumstances and wrong in others. It's a very strange thing, really.
Many times I've thought of you. Days we shared were so few. Fascinated by your eyes, intrigued by your skin. I had no chance of resisting, but I'd like to know, I want to know, I've got to know you're okay. Just to fall